海砂浜夏出会い夕暮れぐさま。我が八つ当たりは神をも殺す。夕暮れにて接触、黄昏にて天の子。そう来なくてはな。
Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Summer Zhufu. She's a limited 4-star Avenger introduced in Summer Celeb Experience, and as one of CL's bannermates, there's a good chance you'll be seeing her in due time. For her part, Zhufu is sick and tired of playing discount Castoria, running into combat with Outrage as an aggro magnet. Now she's taking the field, and she's out for blood. Zhufu's noble phantasm is Death at Twilight, Chainsaw at Dusk. This is a single target buster attack with a chance to instantly kill its target. If it succeeds at that insta-kill, your party gets 20% attack for 3 turns. The overcharge grants anti-human attribute damage. Anti-human on a buster servant is interesting, since that's a buff Koyan Light already provides. But having it baked in lets you double down and really make a mess out of human enemies, especially berserkers and rulers. Zhang Yu is a human attribute berserker, by the way, so if you haven't done Lost Bell 3 by the time you get her, you can do something really funny. Shi Huangdi is also vulnerable on paper, but he spams an invuln on his NP, which will require some finesse. To go along with Chainsaw at Dusk, Zhufu has Collection of 10,000 Deaths. This gives her 3 turns of insta-kill chance, NP damage, and 3 separate power mods against burned, cursed, and poisoned enemies. Sticking with insta-kill for the moment, this skill alone lets Zhufu murk regular bronze enemies, so if you see any with a big health bar, you can have Zhufu blow them up and power up your team at the same time. It's possible to reach for silver rarity enemies as well, but to meet those numbers, you're gonna need help. The Tsukihime Mystic Code, the Soya High School uniform, is a must-have for situations like this, though incorporating it means you'll lose out on a swap code. So normally if you go this route, you're running Zhufu as your sole attacker or with a self-destructor. By the way, if you're not familiar with how insta-kill works, this only really applies to non-servant enemies. Servants have extremely low death rates, even if they're bronze rarity. As for those ailment anti-buffs, I regret to inform you that Zhufu has no baked-in way of applying them, so you'll have to outsource. Koyan Sky of Darkness can apply all 3 at once, while also buffing Buster and giving 30% charge to your team. She's also got targeted overcharge for Zhufu. Command codes are another valid source. You just need to shotgun them across your frontline. Some notable ones for Zhufu herself include Tarask, Tragic Dragonkin that new Knot of Love for poison and crit damage, Bathory Erzurbat style idol for curse and defense ignore, and Consort of the Sun for burn and crit damage. Lohi not only applies a 5-turn curse and poison combo on a skill, but she's a formidable berserker in her own right. Combine her damage with an 80% personal battery, party buster and quick buffs, and an AoE noble phantasm that burns, and you've hit the jackpot. The two make a functional multi-core duo, and depending on your needs, you may even run them with Ruler Scotty to get relevant buffs across both units. Zhufu has her own contribution to the multi-core stew with Encampment Evolution, Settlement. This is a party 10% battery, 10% no matter what level it's at, plus a level of overcharge for your frontline. Nice for Chengnong/Arash memes, and also used with Zhufu's own noble phantasm. It also has a charge regeneration effect that does scale with levels, 10% for 3 turns when maxed out. While a modest value and not the most relevant for double Koyan Light setups, it can turn the tide in combination with other charge sources. Lohi, for instance, has a 20% splash effect on her main battery. With the right combination of servants, you can squeeze out an extra NP by stacking effects like this. A skill that does play more nicely with Gun Koyan is Taoist Arts, Doll Manipulation. This gives Zhufu an art/buster buff and is also a 30% battery on a 6-turn cooldown when maxed. Given its magnitude, you'll want to grab her second append as well. This gives you a nice, round 50% on turn 1 and spares you from developing a frontline Oberon fetish. But wait, remember Encampment Evolution? That's another 10%, so you can actually keep append 2 at level 1, save yourself a lore even. How economical. As you'd expect from Zhufu, she has a bit of a fixation on Consort Yu, and this extends to her having an anti-Lancer append, which is Summer Yu's class. But she's actually a really bad servant to fight her with, because A, she's Earth attribute, not human, and B, Zhufu has a passive that specifically nerfs her damage against Consort Yu, both versions of her. But it's not all bad on the passive front. She has Oblivion Correction EX for a nice chunk of free crit damage. Your other equipment's gonna come down to the usual. Black Rail against bosses, and first day of filming if you either don't have it, or need to farm 3 single target waves in a row. The latter lets you run Zhufu with 2 coins and an Oberon for a full clear. Unfortunately, when she's by herself, Encampment Evolution doesn't give her enough juice to run this combo with Black Grail, not without running some seriously awkward compositions. At her core, Zhufu is a beatstick buster Avenger, a single target one at that, making her one of 2 in the game after the old Fossil Jolter. Certain card type combos can be rare, especially among the extra classes. and when a need for those comes up, you just have to make do with what you've got. But Jufu is also more than just a class and a card type. Her anti-human damage gives her room to operate in higher difficulty content, her anti-ailment power mods reward creative team building and use of command codes to stretch her damage, and her party buffs, while modest in the charge department, do provide value that can swing the balance of a borderline functional team. She's not necessarily a world-changing servant, and against a target that fights back, Summer Arise is probably better suited just due to her card type. But Jufu can still carve out weird advantages for herself. Mostly a fun mess-around servant if you ask me. But in the absence of specialized attackers, you can mainline her with reasonable effectiveness. I've already talked about the story of the real-life/legendary Jufu in the servant guide for alter ego form, so this time around, let's look at her in-game story. Now, if you summon the 3-star Jufu in FGO, then you may have noticed she has a bit of a peculiar reaction.
サーバント、キャスター改めアルターエゴ。神名をジョフ。嘘、ここ、カルデア。なんだよ、もうなんか恨みでもあんのかよ。あれ、待ってよ。グッサマ。ねえ、グッサマいるの？いるんでしょ？ほら、早く出して。早く。
Fate's pretty weird about servants keeping their memories between summonings, and you have some technicalities going on here too. But the short version is that she knows what went down the first time you met her. This takes us back 2 years before she became playable, to a little event called Servant Summer Camp. And by little I mean impossibly, crushingly long. But I'll give you the need to know. You're tasked with investigating a singularity somewhere in the mountains of Japan, and along for the ride is Consort Yu. Zhang Yu tells her to go and they can make it a couple's vacation, but then he debates her and doesn't go. Instead he sends Lon Ling to tell her that if he showed up, the singularity would go to shit. And it would also go to shit if she didn't go. So couple time will have to wait until later. She can't even call to complain about it because something's jamming communication back to Chaldea. So you set up shop in a cottage near a lake, and your caster crew tells you that while the cottages are okay, the rest of the mountain is fucked up. Cursed to a serious degree. I don't believe there's a standard measurement for curses in FGO, but if I had to make some shit up, I'd ballpark it around Kernunos' dandruff. Not a world-ending level, but you certainly don't want to loiter. Kiara's here too, by the way, though you don't seem to recognize her as that Kiara even after she gives her name. By the way, I'm going to refer to Yu Meiren as either Consort Yu or Paisen in this story, just for clarity. So if I ever say Yu without putting Consort in front of it, I'm referring to Yu, the player, aka Fujimaru Ritsuka. At night, weird shit starts happening. You're accosted by horror-movie-themed enemies, starting with Phantom of the Opera doing a Jason impression. Machete Jason, not one-star Jason. Figuring that these enemies work on the rules of their respective genres, you have the option of using Ilya as a human shield, since slasher villains don't kill children. I guess. I don't know, it worked out. What do you want from me? You're about to celebrate your victory when the ghost of Consort Yu shows up to announce she died during the fight. From an axe to the head, which normally wouldn't be fatal, at least for her. She's sort of a nature spirit, and when it comes to dying, she's a bit like Arquade in that she'll bounce back very quickly. To add to the weirdness, inappropriate buildings start popping up that, somehow, no one noticed before, like an apartment complex. And you also start finding strange journals written in code, a mix of old Chinese and Japanese that only Consort Yu can decipher, at least at first. As your exploration continues, Paisen keeps finding new ways to die, like being twisted into a pretzel by a ghost that looks an awful lot like Asagami Fujino. Turns out it is her, by the way, not just a placeholder. After an escapade through a dream hotel populated by crusty old dudes having a bad time, you find a loose bus stop that says, Horai. What's up with that? Later on, Max starts having a strange reaction to conversations with you, though the two of you seem to patch things up while watching a fireworks show put on by the Valkyries. The next morning, though, something is up again. She calls you to ask whether you're ready for the Abigail takedown operation, and you have no clue what the fuck she's talking about. It's a long story for the record. This event has like 3 major quote-unquote villains, which contribute to its brutal length. But back on track, your confusion makes Mash really confused, and feeling that something is terribly wrong, you ask to see her in person immediately. While trying to pick a location, she suggests the hotel, which as far as you're concerned, only exists in a dream. She realizes something and sprints off, saying she can't wait to see you. Then Consort Yu picks up her phone to tell you to come down for breakfast. Which is also when Consort Yu walks into your room. They see their doppelganger and the two immediately start insulting each other, to the point where they decide to throw hands in person outside the cottage. Except neither one can find the other. Sigurd sees what's going on and gets on the line. He tells you that you just ran off with Mash on his end. Realizing something, he asks you to name the servants that are currently with you. It quickly turns out that you've been operating in two separate groups aside from Consort Yu, who's in both. To double check, Sigurd and Emiya, currently in different teams, fire their noble phantasms skyward, revealing that they're on opposite sides of the lake. Your groups combine their map data to reveal that the lake and its facilities are mirrored in a yin-yang shape. At this point, Sigurd declares that the other Fujimaru Ritsuka is the mastermind behind the singularity, since they and Mash have just gone missing. Abigail offers to lead you to the midpoint between the two halves of the mountain, though she warns you to be ready to fight her once you arrive. While she waits, she talks to an unidentified individual. She acts coldly towards them, telling them to fuck off before Chaldea shows up. The unknown whines, saying that they're the one who summoned her here. Abigail retorts that there's no contract between them, so their association is just business. They then consider Kiara, who's the other major boss in the singularity, and one who's working against them. Another very long story that I won't be talking about today. Abigail confirms that she's their enemy, and the unknown party laments having so many enemies, before finally leaving at Abby's insistence. When she does, Abigail muses that, quote, love this lopsided isn't really any different from hate, and questions whether a co-conspirator is even aware of that contradiction. Once the fight gets going, Abby is offended that your servants are firing off reckless attacks, using you as a glorified battery. Ilya deduces that Abigail's goal is to protect Fujimaru Ritsuka, even if it is in a really fucked up and roundabout way, something about protecting dreams. You then defeat her by taking yourself hostage and using Consort Yu's noble phantasm to launch yourself high into the air, where only Abigail can save you. She does so and submits to your authority via contract. At the hotel, the parties meet, and so do the two Consort Yus. Their tempers may have cooled down from the earlier incident, but the need to distinguish between them with a Player 2 outfit leads to fresh bloodshed. They fight each other to a draw, concluding that it's impossible to fight yourself and win, a declaration that makes Emiya cringe out of his skin. They foist the choice upon Ritsuka, who picks one arbitrarily to wear the dead ghost outfit. You then move on to fighting Kiara, and I'll spare you the details, though it involves some major rage baiting. Never took her for a normies die kind of character, but you learn something new every event. Once you get her on side, you brainstorm back at the cottage. Your crew notes the absence of a graveyard, and Ruby, Ilya's wand, jokingly says it might be in the basement, and surely enough it is. The reason your team couldn't pick it out is because the stench of death extends across the entire mountain, so a graveyard under your feet wouldn't have drawn immediate notice. You find a large cavern underneath the cottage, one that feels more like the underworld than a mere graveyard. And as you move deeper, you step into an unusual chamber. Your servants are overcome by the stench of curses and death, holding up only with the help of Murasaki's barrier. Abigail remarks that staying in a place like this would turn any normal servant insane, and Kiara notes that the room's decor is a collection of finality and death, impressive in scope but not to her taste. One of the Consort Yus demands the killer come out, and Jufu emerges. She seems crestfallen and asks if Paisen remembers her. She does, but doesn't understand why the sorcerer did all this. Emiya realizes that the mountain's called Horai because that's where the legendary Jufu was sent to obtain the elixir of immortality. She says she's been waiting for 2,200 years, offering not just her own life and expertise, but those of her loyal subordinates too. When Paisen still expresses confusion, Jufu says her goal has been to kill her for her own sake. Though she was never explicitly asked to do so, her studies in immortality led her to conclude that she held the responsibility to bring Consort Yu death. She asked whether the last few thousand years have been torture, which the immortal can't deny. Jufu then reveals she was summoned as a servant and quote-unquote happened across a holy grail. She then used it to make the singularity. 40 years ago, the villagers, before their disappearance, managed to prove that it was possible to kill an immortal. So Jufu gathered a collection of every method of murder known to humankind and placed it into a mask. She counts that Paisen has died 6 times in the singularity. One more and the mask will adopt the concept of killing immortality. She then asks Consort Yu to praise her. Paisen admits that while she's always feared life, there's another part of her that hates death. Between finding Zhang Yu again and getting a pair of Kohai to take care of, Yu and Mash, she currently wants to live. She then tells Jufu that she disapproves of the way she made that mask, to which the mastermind says she didn't kill anyone, since it makes keeping the village a secret easier. Now to be honest, she's not exactly lying here, strange as it sounds. This is something that comes up in all the little files you collect around the map. But the experiments in death were conducted using human-like dolls equipped with mass production masks to collect death and then feed it into the main mask. Really, her whole organization only killed one human who wasn't an enthusiastic participant. Sure, there was a lot of deception involved, and she did create a nexus of artificial suffering on a massive scale, but Jufu says it was the only way. Paisen isn't having it. She just asks to get rid of the mask and to give Mash back. But Jufu refuses. She and her followers have spent 2,200 years on this project, just so Consort Yu could die happy. So she's gonna kill her right here and right now. Despite the best efforts of Abigail and Kiara, your team is put in a desperate spot, and the Prince of Lanling acts as the rear guard, staying behind so everyone else can escape topside. After a brief exchange, Lanling surrenders in exchange for Mash's freedom. Jufu readily accepts these terms, saying she's a nice girl. Before falling, Lanling tells Jufu that what she's doing is wrong, but she's doing it for the right reasons. With that irritation out of the way, she turns her attention to Mash, regretting that the two of them couldn't become friends. So this requires some explanation. There were scenes prior to the revelation that they were two Ritsukas. Some of these would refer to you, the player character, as the wrong sex. Now at first it's easy to write this off as a bug, or the translator's doing a sloppy job. But unlike Koyanskaya demanding your prostate as tribute, this is true to the source material. In all the scenes where you were physically with Mash, that wasn't you. That was Jufu disguised as you. She used the yin-yang formation of the mountains as a means to impersonate you on the other side, but this had an unexpected consequence. Whatever sex you are, she becomes the opposite. Though an obvious flaw, she was able to largely smooth this over with illusion spells. All that Mash and the others felt was a vague sense that something somewhere wasn't adding up. But all that time quote-unquote you spent with her, like with the fireworks and whatnot, actually caused Jufu to develop a fondness for Mash, and this soft spot comes up once in a while. As for the mask she made, it's some seriously evil shit. For reference, Kiara originally used her beast powers to manifest into this area for a vacation, while the singularity was still forming. But she got killed out of nowhere. Durable as she was, she managed to eject what was left of herself to the bottom of the ocean and recuperate with some lucky meals. Without that help, she would have been done for. Mash is waiting for the party back upstairs, having awoken in her bed. Paisen concludes that Lanling made a deal, but is probably still alive. Emiya asked if she knew Jufu while she was alive, and she thinks, quote, "It wasn't a big deal at all. It was the kind of encounter people have all the time. The search for something that never existed led to her having to leave her hometown. And when she met me through a combination of luck, coincidence, and sheer tenacity, she put me on a pedestal I could never live up to. Remember that Jufu was tasked with finding the elixir of life by Qin Shi Huang, and neither refusal nor failure were options. So she was gonna pull one over on the Emperor and skip town with his expedition fleet. That's why she set up shop in Japan." Before she left, she had one last conversation with Consort Yu, where the latter says she has no hope the two of them will ever see each other again. To which Jufu replies, "Well, that's too bad. I'm sure I'll see you again someday. My fortune said as much." Smooth operator. The team tries to think up a strategy. Emiya noticed that while the mask is incredibly dangerous, Jufu herself is a comparatively weak spirit origin. Quote, "A conglomerate of pure malice more than anything." Sigurd proposes the rather insane idea of tanking death through runes and the power of love, which is so hammy that it even makes Brynhild embarrassed. Consort Yu then says she'll take point. Sigurd will distract Jufu while she smashes the mask. She's confident she knows the method that Jufu intends to be her final death, and plans to use it against her. Though this puts Paisen in extreme danger, she insists that she needs to be the one to do this. Returning to Jufu's chamber with Abigail's help, Consort Yu makes the mistake of calling Yu Kohai in front of her old friend. She'd never done that for Jufu, so filled with jealous rage, the latter starts threatening Yu specifically. Your team springs into action, and as Paisen closes in on Jufu, the mastermind sends out Lanling, who she calls Darklon, quote, "Because now you're a brutal man who will emerge from the darkness to strike at Lady Yu wherever she may hide," unquote. Her plan is for him to demoralize Consort Yu with a torrent of abuse until she accepts death, but his knightly character ruins this plan almost immediately. Instead, he starts admonishing her with his true thoughts. How she pushes people away but clings to them tightly the second they get past her abrasive front and earn her trust. How she's ruined countless lives by making them pine for her. That there are aspects of her so enchanting that people would become beasts for her sake. At this, Jufu then demands to know if Lanling has been harboring such beastly desires towards his lady. He denies this, having compartmentalized the various forms of affection. Jufu finds this agreeable, comparing Consort Yu to a marble statue at times. Yu and Mash have a chance to agree with this, just to pile on. Eventually, Paisen reinitiates combat just to stop him before they both die of embarrassment. Lanling passes out from exhaustion, but Jufu has another trick up her sleeve. The other Consort Yu. She'd split Paisen in two, so that her final death could be at her own hands. In the battle between the two Paisens, Yor says, if you fight death with death and life with life, then of course, you've got to fight explosions with explosions. She tells Zhufu, you thought you would kill me with me? That would mean losing a battle against myself, and that's never going to happen. Or as another translation so eloquently put it, fuck you, I'd rather not. She then blows herself up along with her doppelganger, spraying blood everywhere much to Zhufu's horror. Ritsuka has a somewhat desensitized reaction to this, saying it's pretty gross even when you see it coming. Sigurd tells him he probably shouldn't get used to seeing stuff like that. Zhufu is baffled by these reactions. But of course, Consort Yu isn't the sort to stay dead. She regenerates. Zhufu is briefly relieved before demanding to know what's happening. Where's the other one? You see, when they both blew up, Paisen took the opportunity to fuse back into a single being. Now she's got double the spirit origin, double the density, and the same amount of love for Zhang Yu since that was already maxed out. Zhufu still has her mask, and Consort Yu plans to smash it, then punish her for her misdeeds. Zhufu is briefly excited at the prospect of this punishment, but regains her composure and settles on killing Consort Yu personally. She then transforms into a massive placeholder ghost, at least in gameplay. In the battle, Paisen manages to break the mask. She doesn't need it anymore. Zhufu says that she might not need it now, but what if someone summons her and makes her do things that eat away at her soul or imprison and torture her for their own gain? Paisen says that's a problem for her future self. Quote, now that I've been reunited with Lord Zhang Yu, my place, my feelings will always be right here. Oh yeah, and her two kohai as well. Zhufu marvels at her fickleness, before internally musing that, in many ways, Consort Yu hasn't changed at all. No, it's she that changed. She wanted to keep Paisen for herself, even though she knew she couldn't be tied down. She then says that while her actions may have condemned her to hell, she doesn't regret it at all, since it let her see Consort Yu again. She then fades. Back at the cottage, the crew decide to spend their last day in the Singularity relaxing. While the others head off, Yu and Mash stay to watch the sunrise. After this, you can find Zhufu's diary on the map. It notes events since her summoning, and she understood her return to Mount Horai to mean she should continue her work. She takes stock of the place and marvels at the talent of her disciples. Though the village came to ruin just 40 years before her arrival, they had come remarkably close to accomplishing their goal. She doesn't intend to let their accomplishments go to waste. She finds out that she was recorded in history as a man and blames her enemies in the Qin court, since the emperor himself didn't really care about that sort of thing. We then learn that as the Singularity's master, she was able to brainwash servants and also read Fujimaru Ritsuka's memories. This, combined with her illusions, was how she was able to fool Mash and the others. Though she's a coward by nature and terrified of fighting, she resolved to do what she could. She then thinks about Consort Yu's reaction to what she's got planned. She was ready to be hated or praised, but had also developed a yearning to keep her close by forever. She ponders failure, but thinks she's okay with that too. The next entry finds Zhufu in a state of mental anguish. She states that she loved Consort Yu both platonically and romantically, and that should have been enough for her. But now she's learned about Paisen's history with Zhang Yu. She expresses a mix of jealousy and relief. Now even if Zhufu dies, she won't have any regrets. She feels no pressure to win, and knows that regardless of how it turns out, Consort Yu will still be happy. The last passage addresses Chaldea, saying they must be reading this if they won. Quote, so Fujimaru, if that's you, then I'll ask you here and now. Please take care of Lady Yu Meiren for me. And Mash, if you're reading this too, then I'd just like to say I'm sorry for everything. But I really did enjoy the time we spent together. By the way, there's a line in my room where Zhufu finds out that Mash read her diary.
ねえ、ちょっとマスターさん、マスちゃんになんか言わなかった？え、何も言ってない？じゃあ、なんであんなに仲良くしてくれるの？嬉しいけど、とても嬉しいけど。私が夏に書いた日記？それを読んだの？
Thanks for watching, lads. This took me significantly longer than I expected, but it was a nice trip down memory lane. Servant Summer Camp is a cool twist, but it's got way too many moving parts. It reminds me of one of those Turn of the Millennium superhero movies, where they try to juggle 3 villains at the same time and it almost never works out. But instead of turning dilute and vapid like those movies, the length of the story increased proportionally, combined with the side stories, and it's just too damn long for its own good. But with that said, stay subscribed for more servant guides and stories. I also stream every weekend at 3 p.m. Pacific Time, Friday through Sunday at twitch.tv/Finotaisen. Got some unusual arrangements going on this month, so take a peek. You might be surprised. Except on Sundays, that's always FGO day.